Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast. The podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and today I'm talking with Dr. Jen Unwin, who is a clinical psychologist and a self-confessed lifelong carb addict, and also the author of Fork in the Road, which is a publication that guides you in a clear way to identifying if you have a carb addiction. Because when you find the motivation to change your life and understand how to build the right daily eating plan, plus strategies for long-term success, then you can free yourself from the emotional and physical dangers of overeating sugars, flours, and processed foods. Jen and I are really on the same wavelength, and we'll get to our chat in just a minute. But before we do, I'd like to invite you over to my website, aftersugarclub.com, to surf around, have a look at the free resources there, including the videos about what to eat. Click on the tab, What to Eat. And you can also download your simple guide to getting more energy with less sugar. Click on the tab, Simple Guide. And you can also click on the Podcast tab to find all the podcast episodes as well as my 5 tips to help you with cravings. And if you want to get all the support, the encouragement, and the accountability that you need to really break free from sugar so that you don't suffer from all the health issues connected with sugar, including cravings and energy crashes, then join us in our monthly membership, the After Sugar Club. Just go to the website aftersugarclub.com and click on the green button, Join the Club. You can also come say hi on my Facebook page, Life After Sugar, on my new YouTube channel, Life After Sugar. Come check out the videos and subscribe. And also on Instagram at My Life After Sugar. That's where I post pictures of what I eat, what I do, Instagram stuff, so that you can see that it's totally possible to have a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. All right, here's my chat with Dr. Jen Unwin. Hi, Jen. Nice to see you. So, Jen, can you tell me in your personal life, your story how did you feel when you were still consuming sugar?
Oh, wow. So, do you want the long version or the collapsed version?
Oh, long version is good.
The long version of the story with sugar. Okay. So, I'm one of those people who, looking back, it's always been about sugar. I mean, some of my earliest memories, I don't know if other people will kind of will chime with this, but when I look back, my whole childhood was sort of, not my whole childhood, but some of the highlights were food related. We're quite a sort of foodie family. One of my earliest food memories is going to Sunday school and making cheese scones and having them warm with butter. And I can still remember that now. And I must have been 4 or 5, I was quite young. And developed a real love of baking, all things baking. My mum was quite a baker. In fact, her relatives had her aunts had a bakery shop in Sheffield in the UK, and so they were amazing bakers. So we had all that going on, and for sure, looking back, my mum was a sugar addict because she would oscillate between this amazing baking and cooking, and we were all eating amazing things, and then on a diet and we're all half starving to death because she was on a diet. And so that was all in the background. I got a lot of pleasure from food. And then when did it start to become a bit problematic? Maybe a little bit later on. So there were a couple of difficult things that happened. My dad's brother unfortunately died in a traumatic accident, and then he himself was, I think probably maybe related to the stress of that, got a renal carcinoma and was really sick. And we'd be about 10 or 11 then, I think, sort of early teenage. And I think that's perhaps when my relationship with food and sugar sort of shifted into something that was slightly less wholesome, because I would obviously the parents were kind of preoccupied and occupied with all of that, quite rightly. So I would be baking and making myself things, sneaking down to the kitchen and kind of seeing what was in the, getting the cooking chocolate out of the cupboard, or the what's it called, condensed milk. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Delicious. So my relationship started becoming a bit more, well, for want of a better word, pathological, I would say. And then of course the result was being an overweight teenage girl, which in those days wasn't so common, actually. I mean, in the class, I think there's only me as one other girl who was a bit overweight. So that wasn't good for the whole sort of self-esteem thing, and that went on probably till I was about 16. And then something kind of clicked in my head at that age, and I really started with the dieting, which, isn't much, but looking back, isn't much better really. At the time it felt a bit better because I lost a load of weight, got down to about 9 stone in English money, and was kind of happy with that. But that it set up a sort of ongoing up and down weight dieting, putting on weight, losing weight cycle, because I at that point obviously hadn't understood that the problem was around sugar and carbohydrates. And so I would always go back to having those things, trying to have them in moderation, like was the message and still is the message, utterly failing to keep that up for any length of time. And that went on until probably about 10 years ago. So I'd have been in my early 40s then.
Can I just ask what you were doing to lose the weight at that time?
Oh, I'd do any latest crazy thing. So early on, it was some of the crazy things that were around in the 80s, like the grapefruit egg diet. I probably did that cabbage one. I can't remember, but I'm sure I will have done. Weight Watchers I'd done Slimming World. I did do Atkins actually for a while, and that was fine. But again, because I hadn't understood that it was the sugar and the carbohydrate that I needed to abstain from, I would, maybe it would come to Christmas and I'd have the usual Christmas, thinking, oh, I'll just get back on with it afterwards. And of course, it's a real struggle to do that. Yeah. So yeah, I've tried everything. Actually, usually, as I say, was reasonably successful because I'm quite a determined, organised person. If there was a scheme which I read about and I thought, oh, good scheme, this could be the one, I'd do the scheme and I would lose the weight. And then I sort of oscillated between about 12 stone and 9 stone. It kind of would go up 3 stone every time. I get
14 pounds in a stone, if I remember.
Stone. Yeah, so 3 lots of 14. I'd put it on, then I'd get to a certain point and I'd think, oh, for heaven's sakes, this is ridiculous. And then I'd find some scheme that appealed, lose the weight, and off we'd go again. So it was this kind of crazy roller coaster that I'm sure lots of people listening will identify with. Yeah, then I had an early menopause. I was only about 39, and I think that was probably tied in with all this ridiculous. I'm sure my hormones were a mess by that point. Anyway, so yeah, menopause at 39. Got to about 42, and then stumbled across a book by Dr. John Briffa, who's a British GP, called Escape the Diet Trap. I don't know if you've come across it.
Not that one, no.
No, I mean, it's not that well known, and it was sort of, as I say, about 10 years ago now. But it was a lovely little book, and I thought, Escape the Diet Trap, it was the title that spoke to me, really, and I thought, yes, that's what I need to do, Escape the Diet Trap. When I read it, looking back, it's low carb described, basically, low sugar, low carb. It gives you the science in a really simple way. some meal plans and recipes, why it works kind of thing, why it works for people with type 2 diabetes, all of that. And fortunately for me, that became the latest scheme. So I threw myself into it and went cold turkey off all the carbs and sugars, and felt absolutely terrible for 8 days with the old keto flu, low carb flu. But then the lights came on after about 8 days, and unfortunately, he'd said in the book that that would happen. You see, so I was kind of hanging on for this phenomenon where suddenly I'd feel amazing, and I did. I suddenly felt really energetic. I had fewer headaches. I'm a migraineur. Migraine's much better. Yeah, more energetic. Didn't need as much sleep. Just felt more cheerful, less anxious. It was amazing. So that was brilliant. So that was about, as I say, about 10 years ago. Um, those who know me will know that Dr. David Unwin is my husband, low carb GP.
Yes.
And we out of that experience and him reading the book and seeing what happened to me and us thinking about it, came the project that we're still working on at his practice, where we're helping people to put their diabetes type 2 into remission without drugs. And we've got over 100 people now into remission without drugs, and lots of other people significantly improved, just not right back to remission yet. So that's come out of that fantastic project. So that was a really big part of the story. I think I still hadn't, heaven knows why, because I'm a psychologist, still hadn't understood the addictive component and the addictive story in it all, probably because I didn't want to understand it. It took me probably another 4 or 5 years to start thinking that occasionally I was still having problems. I was still to some extent losing and gaining weight, even though overall I was sticking to low carb. There were times when I found it really hard to rein, maybe Christmas, those sorts of holidays, going slightly off piece, and then finding it really hard to rein in again. About 4 or 5 years ago, I started to think it's of it more as in an addiction frame. And I retired about 2.5 years ago now from the NHS, partly to devote my time to learning all about sugar and food addiction for my own sake, but also so that I can bring that into the work that I do with other people. So I trained with Bitten Johnson in Swindon. Did her holistic addiction medicine course, trained to use the sugar assessment, and now what I'm doing is with someone called Heidi Yeva, we're running groups for people with food addiction, and we're doing it as a clinical study, so a little bit like we did at Norwood, because there's very little research in this area. So we're offering treatment, but we're doing it, on the understanding that people will fill out our questionnaires and our surveys and so on. So that's the whole sort of arc of it, really, to where I am today, which is really a lot deeper understanding of the addictive component of those foods and how that robs us of our ability to make rational choices.
Yeah, and I've been reading Michael Moss's latest book, Hooked. That it's explaining that it's not actually food. First of all,
we don't need it, do we? It's
great.
No,
the things that hook us are not foods.
Not needed, not foods, not nutrition. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we've sort of come to believe that they're foods, or they've been marketed as foods, but they're industrially engineered, concocted sort of mishmash of flavorings and additives, made in a lab.
And sugar is a drug. I 100% believe that now. I mean, I think I was a bit skeptical in the early days, like what's the evidence that sugar acts in the brain as the same way as drugs and alcohol? But when you look into it, the research is absolutely there. Your brain is rewired in exactly the same way. Look at the work of Nicola Wiener, for example, Robert Lustig. I completely believe that now, and I think that really helps those of us who've had this struggle to feel better about ourselves in a way. That wasn't it's not a personal failing that we didn't manage to stick to these diets or be a certain weight or behave a certain way around food. Our primitive brains, are the survival parts of our brains that have to be able to override logic for our survival, have been sort of engaged, like you say, by the food industry, and will override logic. We've all
Yeah,
had those days where we've said to ourselves, right, today's the day I'm starting. You get in from work, you're a bit tired, you've got an intention to cook a healthy meal, and you actually watch your disembodied hand reach for the biscuit barrel while not wanting to do that thing logically. The primitive brain will always trump it, will always sort of make you do that thing, if you like, and until you've done certain things and trained it not to do that, which is what we sort of focus on in our groups. But yeah, it's powerful stuff. We haven't quite got the free will that we think we have. Some of us, not everybody, some people, but just been having a little debate with someone on Twitter this morning who was talking about, why don't people just moderate? Well, and I was saying, well, some people can, they really can. There's probably about a third of people who are sort of, or these kind of, to us seem like rare unicorns who can. My mother-in-law's one, she's got some chocolates from last Christmas, I think, still on the side, so she can have one chocolate, put it away. I just can't have them in the house because I just can't. That bit of my brain has clocks where they are and will keep nagging me until they're gone in some way. Either they're thrown out, they're given away, or I've eaten them. And it used to be always that it was I'd eaten them. Now
yeah,
it's more likely that they never get in the house because most people know we don't eat that kind of thing. Or I would just give them away. Or I actually don't mind throwing things away now. I used to think that was wasteful, and I used to think, well, if I love somebody, why would I give them the thing that I think's harming me? I wouldn't give it to my grandchildren now. So, if it ever gets in the house, it tends to go in the bin.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's more people like us, because I'm pretty much like you. More people like us than we imagine or that we'd admit to. And now I feel it's kind of coming out the closet, as it were, that addiction to food or the addictive nature of food is a thing. But as a psychologist, you know that sugar is not in the DSM-5 as a recognized addictive substance, whereas caffeine, for example, is. And I'm not saying caffeine shouldn't be. I'm just saying, like, why? Why is it
Why?
not in there?
Absolutely. And there's quite a few of us campaigning now that you've probably seen. So the Food Addiction Institute is campaigning to the DSM, which is part of the American Psychiatric Association, or yeah, I think the APA. And in the UK, Heidi and myself, and also under the auspices of an organisation, a charity here that we support called the Public Health Collaboration, are campaigning with the World Health Organization, who published the ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases, to get that changed. I think there's a number of reasons why it's difficult. I think one is, identifying that one substance that is addictive. A lot of people say, well, actually, yes, ultra processed food is the addictive thing, but like, what's the thing in it? I think it is sugar, but of course, there's going to be a massive pushback from the food industry to identifying sugar as addictive, and they invest in a lot of research to sort of argue the other way. When you look at the papers and you drill down into the invested interests of those that say that sugar isn't addictive, you always find some murky tale. So I think that's one reason. I think we're about the place we were when people started thinking nicotine was harming people's health, and the companies were standing up in Congress and saying it's not addictive. I don't know if you remember that, some videos of them standing up and saying, I believe nicotine isn't addictive. I think we're about there, and hopefully in our lifetimes we'll see this change. And I think if we all keep campaigning and keep looking at the things that were successful in fighting the tobacco industry, but yeah, they've got a lot of money on their side and vested interest, so it may be a little while.
Yeah, because it's not it's not so much that it isn't addictive, it's that it's not recognized officially as being addictive. And there's a difference because, now you go to any drugstore or chemist in England, and then you'll be able to get patches to stop smoking and gum. And I don't know about in England, but here there's like government paid schemes to help you to stop smoking and all that. There's nothing
Correct.
like that for sugar.
There's nothing. So people either, well, they're trying to help themselves and find out information, and that's why if you type food addiction into Google search, there's something like 600 million hits or something. So lots of people are looking for information for sure. If you go and ask for help, certainly in the UK, a couple of things could happen to you. One is that you could get directed to the eating disorder services, but probably the eating disorder services don't know that much about food addiction, and often the treatment model is a moderation one. Certainly, with anorexia, for example, they try and get people to sort of not be afraid of food, eat a bit of everything. It's never going to work with us. It would never have worked. And I've spoken to a lot of people recently when we've been screening for the groups who've said that had happened to them. They were referred to eating disorder services. That was what they were required to do. They just failed at it. It just made them feel worse. And I think, like you say, there are a lot of us around, but because we tend not to talk about it, people feel very, very isolated. They might be the only one in their family, for example. So one route is that you'll get set down the eating disorders route. And the other route, because if that doesn't work, they won't know what to do with you. You might get sent down the mental health route. And, in some ways that isn't wrong, because often people with food addiction have got themselves they're quite depressed, they might be quite anxious, partly because of the way that sugar messes with your brain chemistry. But that's never going to be a solution, because they're going to treat the anxiety and the depression, and they hardly ever focus on nutrition in mental health services. So it is a shame. I mean, it's fantastic that more people are talking about it, I think, and that we've got, there's your podcast, there's the Food Junkies podcast now, there's Unsweetened CO, that's another great one. I've got my Clubhouse, like you say, on a Wednesday night. There's Sugar X Global. I don't know if you've spoken to those guys.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so there's, I really think the tide. That's why I'm optimistic that the tide is turning. Every year that goes by, there's more and more people talking about it and interested in it, and so on. Yeah, so I worked out so if you look at the prevalence data using the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which is, some people criticise, but is the main measure that we've got. General population prevalence seems to be about 8%. So in the UK, that in adults, that would be equivalent to about 4.3 million adults in the UK. So you're not alone if you're listening to this in the UK or anywhere else in the world, and you have these experiences of, cravings, not being able to stop when you want to, eating more than you intended, eating despite the fact that it's doing you harm. You're not alone, and there is definitely hope. It's just that we need to keep working and keep researching and keep talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in my humble opinion, as a layperson, in the sense that I'm not, scientifically trained, certainly not nutritionally trained, I know how to teach Romeo and Juliet, but that's about it.
That's a good skill.
Yeah. So it's like, I can't understand why nutrition experts and health experts don't sort of know just the basics, which is that we're all different, and why do they push the everything in moderation approach when we are all different? Like it's patently obvious that that's not the approach for everybody. Why is it still being pushed?
Yeah, I think human beings love to simplify things, don't they? And that message again was so funded by the food industry. I think the everything in moderation, and also this kind of thing about, well, you can have your Coke, but then if you exercise, they link it with exercise, don't they? The advertise at sporting events, this idea that it's sort of calories in, calories out. I think is really deeply ingrained, and it was in me. I mean, I counted calories for decades. I really believe that model. It makes such sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So I think we've the older I get, the more I think we've just all been had. Really, yeah. That moderation was a message, is a message that suits the food industry. You know, have a little bit, have a treat, you deserve it. Food has become more like sort of entertainment, comfort, a sort of sort of an amusing part of our lives, instead of being about nutrition and nutrient density and what does the body actually need to build. You know, your body replaces itself completely, doesn't it? And I mean, some things replace really fast, like your skin and your hair's growing, and I can't remember what the figure is now for how often, in fact, your entire body has turned over and you've become a complete new person on a molecular level. You have to replace those molecules, and what are we actually built of? It's sort of fat and protein, isn't it? We're not built of carbohydrate. There's only a little tiny bit in the whole body. There's 1 teaspoon in your blood and a bit in your liver. So if you want to build a new body, and when you think you look at what we're feeding kids, you know, pizzas, cereals, pasta, fruit. There's no protein. There's no fat. They're not going to build their little bodies, and their brains. Our brains are made of cholesterol, fat. You need some to, you know. And I wish I'd understood that so much earlier. That through eating, what you're trying to do is build that strength, or through feeding your children, you're building a body. You don't build a body out of pizza.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I feel that the message that we get from the top down, as it were, you know, as consumers, as parents, is a kind of a contradictory message where they say, you know, eat healthy, eat your vegetables, and then treat yourself to all this sugary stuff. And for me, at least now, with, you know, now that I've stepped out of this same paradigm that I used to believe in, that we did both believe in, it seems like the message is eat healthy, but that's no fun. To have fun, you need to go to sugar and pizza and all the rest of it. And
Yeah.
it just seems like contradictory. It's just an unhealthy message.
Yeah, it's an unhealthy message, and it's, yeah, I'm sure it's coordinated by the interests of selling food, is selling things that are processed and come in packages, rather than. I have a lot of fun eating I just had enormous fun eating my lunch. And it's all real food. You know, it doesn't come in a packet. It was swimming or walking around or in a hen or growing, like you say. Yeah, vegetables are good. Um, I still love eating and I love cooking, but I've just changed the way that I see that. You know, we still go out to restaurants and choose amazing dishes cooked by amazing chefs. It's just that it's not the bready, desserty, carbohydratey bit of it. I know
Yeah,
it is a struggle. I do remember, you know, cause also some. I'm running some groups with another concern, and people are really saying, like, what do you eat? You know, I'm fed up with eating salad. And I was thinking, I can't remember the last time I had a salad. I mean, I like the occasional salad, but I can't remember the last time I had one, even though it's summer. Because I'm always thinking of hot food to cook that I really enjoy. But I do remember that, you know, I do remember 10 years ago thinking, oh right, I've got to cut all that out. What do I eat? Because I used to be the person who got in from work and put the pan of pasta or rice on before I'd even decided what to have with it. So that, because that was the thing that took the longest to cook. But now I start the other way around. I start with the protein. I start with, what protein are we having? Fish, meat, eggs, whatever. And then the veg is a sort of, that's the entertainment for us, really. A bit of, like, what if we had a bit of celeriac mash for lunch and some chopped fried cabbage.
lovely.
So that was the entertainment on the side of my liver,
Yeah.
which other people won't think of as entertaining, but I find it so delicious now. Fried liver, and a little bit of boiled ham as well. Just, yeah. So yeah, it is a complete shift of mindset, and a sort of change of habit. But it can be done. I mean, it does take time, but it can be done. And you could, it's taking small steps in that right direction. And yeah, I mean, you never know with anybody what piece of information or what motivation is going to be the thing that's going to be the start of their journey, if you like, their fork in the road, which is what the phrase that I like to use, um, where you start that journey to a different destination. Sometimes, certainly in the practice, it's because it's the day that they get that information that they've been diagnosed with type 2 or some other condition that's probably related to the way that they're eating, and I think that can become a massive motivation. Um, and we all need that, really, that moment where we go and go, I need to do something different. Either it's for my physical health, or for me, I suppose it was partly that to do with the weight, although I was never ill with it. It was more to do with the sort of mental effects, the just that lack of energy and cheerfulness in life.
Yeah, that you regained when you changed your diet to real foods. And I think that even when people, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here it's when people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they also get told, to eat everything in moderation, even the stuff that made them diabetic in the first place. I mean, how can that be legal?
How can that be right? I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And again, things are slowly changing. So when we started 10 years ago, David was probably the only GP in the UK doing that. And we were, it was a little bit edgy, if you like, because we knew what had happened to Gary Fettke and Tim Noakes. And, we were criticised. Fortunately, he was collecting all the data so we could show that nobody had come to any harm. And in fact, obviously, as time goes on, as we keep publishing the outcomes from that cohort, people are getting better and better still. If you catch people within the first year of their type 2 diagnosis, I think it's 96 or 94, anyway, let's say at least 95% of people will put their diabetes into drug-free remission. So the sooner you do it, the better.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy that advice of, sort of, it's almost like eat what you like and cover it with the medication. No medication's going to make you really healthy, and you're going to get the side effects. If David always says, if you've you've eaten your way into this mess, you have to eat your way out of it. And it's not that you have to feel deprived or hungry. All the patients say we don't feel hungry. They feel less hungry, in fact, when they eat this way, because they've not got all the insulin going up and down, and the blood sugars are much more stable, so they don't feel as hungry. They don't suffer.
but that connection between blood sugar levels and insulin and the feeling that the feeling that we interpret as being hunger, because let's face it, we are eating so often every day in the regular, diet, like it's sad, standard American diet, that there's no way that it's hunger.
Yeah.
So, but that connection, I certainly would never have guessed that there's, first of all, that there's any kind of connection between someone who isn't diabetic, like I've never been diabetic, and caring about my blood sugar levels. I thought that was just for diabetics. And then second, that spikes and crashes in your blood sugar levels and production of insulin has anything to do with so-called hunger. Nobody teaches that.
No, exactly. And that's why in a way, we all felt we needed to snack because you were hungry. So I mean, I laugh at myself now looking back. So I had to drive to work pretty early, so I wouldn't eat before I went, but I'd pack myself, get this, a banana sandwich.
Yeah.
And I'd think, well, I'll have that when I'm hungry. I was nearly always hungry on the way to work, or when I just got to work, have that with a coffee. And I'd have taken my lunch, which was something like a pita pocket with salad and a little bit of hummus in it. Again, no protein anywhere to be seen. But I'd be so starving, I'd probably have that at 10:30, and then I've eaten my lunch already, just waiting to get home then so I could have my tea. And yeah, looking back, it's no wonder I was hungry. I just wasn't eating enough protein.
Yeah, eating often and being undernourished
Yeah,
is sort of prevalent, isn't it, in the West, I would say.
I would say so. Yeah, there's so many things I wish I'd known.
And yeah, I mean, what do you have a psychology background or a medical background?
Yeah. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've always worked kind of in physical health settings. So I work with people with chronic conditions like pain or asthma, or diabetes, etc. Sort of helping them to manage and have the best quality of life that they could. Um, so that's where it fitted in really well then to starting to work with David. And my main interest is sort of around hope and the difference that that makes, and how to sort of how to engender hope in people who are feeling pretty hopeless, possibly because of their medical condition or pain, or these things are really difficult to live with. So how do you kind of keep people hopeful, keep people um actively setting themselves little goals, and moving forward. So that worked really well. So it's David's medical knowledge and my knowledge of how to sort of motivate people, if you like. But also I'd done a lot of group work. It was something I really think works well. And doctors aren't particularly trained in group work, so we were able to then run groups. And as I say, I'm now doing that with people with food addiction. And it works so well because A, you feel less isolated in a group. B, the people who are doing well sort of motivate you and bring you on, and they're a little bit further ahead of you, and you can kind of think, oh, I could do that. Or if somebody in the group says to you, try this, I think you're more likely to try it than if a professional says to you, try this, because you can always think, oh, what do they know? They haven't got this problem or whatever. So uh, I think groups can be incredibly supportive and powerful in this setting. And I think people do need, it's a long-term condition. It's lifelong, actually. You're not going to cure yourself of food addiction. You're going to live with it. You're going to eat in a way that means that it doesn't mess with your head and mess with your life. But if you, a bit like diabetes, if you go back to how you were eating, you'll be right back where you started. So it is about keeping it up lifelong, and that's pretty difficult in today's environment because food's everywhere. People are saying, why don't you have just a little bit? As you say, every celebration is some kind of, it's like, it's not right if it's not a sugar fest. So Christmas, Easter, Valentine's, Mother's Day, Halloween, they're all now focused around what is the food that you eat that's you know full of fat and sugar.
Yeah.
So again, there's a complete mindset change there of how are you going to do Christmas, how are you going to have a birthday, still enjoy it, but it doesn't all centered on food. How are you going to train people not to, who know that you used to love that stuff, not to bring you cakes and chocolate? It's quite a complex thing to negotiate, and it does take quite a while to really get that nailed down. And then there'll still always be challenges. There'll always be time when, I don't know, you're stuck at an airport suddenly with nothing, no sort of compliant food that you can get your hands on, or there'll always be some sort of a crisis that you hadn't anticipated that you'll have to navigate.
Yes, because life
Yeah.
carries on, life carries on, and it becomes, in my experience over the last 6 years at least, it becomes more of a social thing to navigate than the actual food.
Yeah.
Because once you've got the food down, it doesn't take long to work out what real foods are, or to, and then you've got to navigate living in a non-food type society.
Yes, yes. And even going, we've got now quite a few, it's kind of spread around here because, and amongst our friends and other people, just because they've seen us do it and how well we how much we enjoy it and how well we are and everything. So we've got a few friends now who will eat, who are low carb, but there's still within low carb kind of things to negotiate often. So as a food addict, I'm pretty, I think because I was pretty sort of rock bottom, as Judy Wolfe would say, who's part of the global.
Yes.
I'm a bit like her. I'm a bit of a rock bottom food addict. So I really don't do well if I have dairy, for example. Would overeat cheese very easily. Don't feel as well if I eat dairy. More cravings, more hunger, etc. So over the years, I've learned to cut out dairy. I don't drink now. I've cut out alcohol. I've cut out everything. Cut out caffeine. I don't eat nuts and seeds, for example. So, but when we have a dinner with all these friends and they're low carb, for them it's still, it still would have cheese, there still would be a cheese course, there might be nuts in something, there'd probably be dairy. I mean, so I never eat the dessert, for example. So even when you've got all your friends going low carb, there's still, as a rock bottom food addict, challenges. And also I tend to just eat once a day. That's my preferred model. I know everybody's different, and that's not what you'd recommend to beginners necessarily, but it does just suit me. But then that can be difficult to negotiate as well if you're out and about with other people, or not every, I have it at lunchtime, so if you're out and about, not everybody wants an enormous lunch, they tend to want an enormous dinner. So
Yeah.
but hey ho, we can't all be, we have to be a little bit flexible.
And I think the advantage for us of being in our 50s is that we stop caring about what other people thought of us, or we care less about that. Or it's not that we don't care, it's just that we're comfy with who we are.
Correct. And you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. So at a restaurant, you have to be able to say, oh, I'll have that, but with, can you do me some green veg? You never get a problem, do you? Just be polite about it, and they'll do it for you. But yeah, you have to feel comfortable with, just stepping out of the norm slightly.
Yes, yeah, and I between you and me, I actually enjoy it.
Yeah, good. That's good. And I
Yeah.
think people say, oh, either the people you're with or the waiter or waitress that will say, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then you get to have a conversation about why you do that, and that's how this virus spreads.
Yeah, exactly, and I like to sort of turn it on its head. So yesterday our teachers went back to my college, and then our director, he said, if you want to come and sit with me in my office, one by one, because we're still not allowed to be in a big group, and have coffee with me. I've got coffee, I've got cream. And I said to him, oh, I'll just have the cream, I don't need the coffee. And he looks at me, I'm like a quarter of the size of him, and he's like, where'd you put it all? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then that opens it up to a conversation in a nice way that they've invited. It's not about preaching to people. If what they're doing for them works for them, that's fine. But that there is this information out there that I think more people could do to know about.
Definitely. And again, in my humble opinion, as a layperson, if that information is not coming from the top down, is not coming from the health experts, the nutrition experts, I guess it's up to us, regular people, to take the information out there and make it as available as possible.
Yeah, I think this has been a bottom up revolution. Things are changing, aren't they? Some associations now are sort of recognizing low carb, and just coming out very, very soon is a paper that in the UK that's been written between David C. Malhotra, myself, I'm trying to think who else is on it, and the British Dietetic Association, recognizing that low carb is a good option for people with type 2 diabetes, and they should be supported in that choice if that's the choice that they want to make. So that's a great big step forward.
Yes. It shouldn't be a big step forward. It shouldn't be a step forward. We should already be there, but let's be realistic. It is a big step forward, and that's great. Yeah. And it's like that over here as well. So if people want to either get in touch with you or participate in any of your projects, how can they do that?
Great question. Right. So I'm mostly on social media. I mostly hang out on Twitter rather than anything else. At Jen_Unwin. I've got a Clubhouse, if people know about Clubhouse.
Yes.
It's on a Wednesday night, 6 p.m. UK time. It's called Fork in the Road. So you can either just go in the Clubhouse app, search for me, Jen_Unwin again, or Fork in the Road. And on a Wednesday at 6 p.m. you should see the room. And we either have a discussion on some sort of topic around food addiction, or we have a speaker. So I was going to say who's on tomorrow, but that doesn't really help people because your podcast won't be out in time. But yeah, we're having the carnivore yogi tomorrow, Sarah Kleiner. But there's always interesting people coming on that people can chat to, and there's other people in the either moderating with me or in the audience as well, who will come up and comment. So people like Bitton's often there, Mike Collins, the Quit Sugar Summit guy, Anna Fruling's usually moderating with me. So lots of, and people can, the great thing about that platform is people can come up and join the discussion. They can ask us anything, basically.
Yeah, it's lovely. I love it there.
It's a really nice platform. People can read the book, which is Profits Go to the Public Health Collaboration, Fork in the Road, which is just my simple guide really to what I understand about food addiction and where to go next for people. And it's got lots of resources and things in the back. Probably message me on Twitter if you're interested in either joining the groups, helping out with the campaigning with the PHC. Even more super exciting, you're probably the first ones that are going to hear this announcement, is next May, linking up with the Public Health Collaboration Conference. We're going to have a one-day conference on the 20th of May in the UK on food addiction.
Wow.
There's going to be some real big speakers, and that's the first of its kind that we know, first international conference on food addiction. So probably watch the PHC website for more details on that, or my social media. That should be really exciting.
Wonderful, smashing, great. It's just fantastic how all of this is now sort of coming to light and being made available for the general public. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for talking with me, Jen.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great chat with Jen. And it's so great to see a health professional, a psychologist like Jen, not only aware and recognizing the problems connected with food addiction, but also having lived it herself. Because what I found with many nutritionists and dietitians and doctors is that through no fault of their own, they don't necessarily seem to recognize or appreciate the reality of food addiction. Maybe because that's not what's taught when they do their studies, or maybe because they just haven't lived it themselves. And quite frankly, it's really difficult to understand someone else's reality when you haven't actually experienced it yourself. So that's why I think that Dr. Jen Unwin and those that she works with are so important to bringing food addiction to the general public's awareness. So thank you, Jen, for this lovely chat, and do come along to Jen's chats on Clubhouse, because they're always full of value. And I just want to remind you also to come check out aftersugarclub.com. That's my website where you'll find lots of free resources to help you cut down sugar. I mean, in my humble opinion, any reduction in sugar is a huge step forward. And if you need regular support and encouragement and accountability, come and join us in our monthly membership, the After Sugar Club, because that's where we have twice monthly Zoom calls, and you'll have access to a growing library of resources and recipes to help you break free from sugar for good. Because yes, you can do it on your own, but why would you want to? It's so much easier when you have the empathetic support and understanding of others who are on the same path as you are. So that's aftersugarclub.com, and click on the green button, join the club. And if you're enjoying this podcast, scroll down and rate it, and leave me a review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.